Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 131 of Two Amazon Sellers and a Microphone, brought to you by Solozo. Today, we're excited because we're going to talk about a topic we don't normally spend a lot of time on, and that's repricing. And on with us today is Ian Kaneshiro from SellerSnap. What's up, Ian? How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Chris and Dustin? I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're in Tel Aviv right now. Is that right?
Yep. Yes, I am. Bright and sunny Tel Aviv, out here in the Middle East, and happy to talk to you guys about repricing.
Oh yeah, well, we're excited. We want to dive into all that. I think it's a really unique topic for a lot of our listeners to talk about. A lot of people that are watching are on the private label side and may not even know much about repricing, but we also have a lot out there that are in the wholesale area, and this is a huge part of your business model if you're not selling your own products, is competing for that buy box. So we're going to jump into all of that, but before we do, anybody who doesn't know you or know much about SellerSnap, you got the floor. Tell us a little bit about how you got into this space yourself personally, and then just a little bit about SellerSnap.
All right, sure. I'd be happy to. Well, I can really trace my e-commerce roots back to my very first job. I worked for a company that was selling sports apparel and memorabilia. It was called Sports Section, and at the time that I joined, it was actually a family company. The time I joined the company, they were still doing catalog sales, if you can believe that. And it was still kind of very early days of e-commerce sales, and they were also selling on Amazon as well in the very, very early days. And so I didn't realize it then, but it was kind of an eye opener into stepping into kind of the e-commerce space. And so I worked there for many years through high school. And then in college, I worked for another e-commerce lingerie company, working with their art department, help kind of supporting the photographers and that data management. And then after school, I moved more into a sales ad tech space before I found my way back into e-commerce, back into SellerSnap, helping out third-party Amazon resellers. And so that's what brought me here today. And so a little bit about SellerSnap is that we are an AI game theory repricer. And what that means is that we take a cooperative approach in order to help our sellers capture the buy box at the highest possible price. And one of the main things that we focus on is avoiding price wars in order to hit those objectives.
Interesting. So let's dive into this and let's start from scratch. I think obviously anybody who's selling on Amazon has an awareness of this, but a lot of the shoppers on Amazon probably don't understand the buy box in general, or that there's a lot of sellers potentially competing to sell the same product. So if you could just give us a little brief overview of the buy box and why it's important to win it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what a lot of customers don't understand is that when they go onto Amazon, when you are making that purchase, you might be making that purchase directly from Amazon or from a 3P seller, as we commonly refer to it, or a third-party seller. And so, it's something like 60 or 70% of all physical product sales on Amazon are from these third-party sellers. And so when a customer goes onto a listings page, when you get pulled to that right side of your screen where you see the options that say, add to cart or buy now, that is the buy box. And so many people don't realize that they have interactions with the buy box, almost on a daily basis. But they say that something like 80% of all Amazon sales go through the buy box, and that number actually goes up when it comes to buying on mobile devices. And so what that means is that all these sellers, whether it's Amazon or one of these third-party sellers, are constantly competing for that space in the buy box. So when that customer is ready to buy, ready to make that action, they're pulling it from my inventory and I'm the one who's selling it rather than any of my competitors.
When you say 80% go through the buy box, explain to everyone who's listening how someone could buy something not through the buy box.
Yeah. So the reason why 80% go through that buy box is because it's the easiest action. You see the item, it's the right price, you click go. But beneath the buy box, you might see, I don't remember the exact text. It's something like view other offers, where you can view all the other offers that from different sellers available on that product.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason why the buy box exists is because Amazon is looking to give customers the best customer experience. And so there's a lot of different factors that go into it, including the most common are, or the most heavily weighted is price. But they're also looking at things like shipping time, average reviews, and a bunch of other metrics as well.
So how does that work? This is something I really never understood, actually, is like the rotation of the buy box. I've done a few retail arbitrage things, and I'm probably the bad guy because I'm always like lowering my price, lowering my price, lowering my price. And it feels like it's like an unspoken rule where like you just match it and just let people rotate and get their share of the pie. But how does it, what's it like, how often does it rotate? You mentioned feedback, shipping time, like what are all those things that people need to be doing if they want to share the buy box? And how often does that rotate?
Couple of different questions there, quite a bit to unpack, and so I'll do my best to touch on everything. In terms of starting on the very basic level of delivery time, we know that there are that customers want what they want, and they want it now. And generally, with Amazon, most products you can get in 2 days thanks to Amazon Prime, and sometimes even a bit faster. And so when we're talking about shipping times, we are Amazon is often looking for that Prime badge. And so that Prime badge can be applied in 2 ways. The first way is sellers getting those items into Amazon fulfillment centers, and Amazon being the one to handle the logistics end to end in order to get it into the hands of the customer. The second way to get that Prime badge is by being part of the Seller Fulfilled Prime program, which means that the seller has gone through the steps in order to ensure that they are able to fulfill that same kind of Prime guarantee that Amazon gives to their customers, and get those items out of their own warehouses into the hands of the customers. And so that's kind of the number one. The most competitive sellers are the ones that offer Prime, period. In terms of being in the buy box, it's hard to talk in general about the number about what metrics you need in order to be the most competitive. So whether that means having that Prime badge, being the best price, average number of reviews, and a whole other slew of metrics that are both transparent to the seller, but also not transparent to the seller. The main anchor for that is the price. And so if you have the best price and you're offering Prime, that will generally put you in the buy box the majority of the time. And so that can change constantly because every single seller whose goal it is to win buy box is using some kind of automation in order to automate that pricing and put themselves in the most competitive place.
So let's talk about that because what repricing tools do, and you can go into this in more detail, is change the price of your product. How often, I don't know how often it changes it. You can go into detail about that, but you're changing the price so that you win the buy box. And I know there's a whole lot of other factors that go into it. So a couple of questions on that. How often are these prices changing? And a question I've always had is, if you make a change to your price, how quick does Amazon pick it up? I mean, how quick is that price actually the live price?
Couple of really good questions. So we're jumping into a bit more of the technicalities behind MWS, or the marketplace web services of Amazon's marketplace, and what are the different limits that are imposed on repricers such as SellerSnap in order to reprice. And so in short, as a third party repricer, we are allowed to send a repricing feed once every 2 minutes before being throttled, before we are no longer able to send repricing feeds. So that is the fastest that SellerSnap or any other third party can reprice. But that is not always the cadence in which you reprice, because different repricers are repricing quickly uses different resources. So some repricers might reprice slower. And in terms of SellerSnap, what our AI does is it understands the cadence of our competitors, and it will say, okay, my competitor is only repricing once every 15 minutes, so I can back off the throttle. I don't need to step on the gas so much and reprice so quickly, because there's no point in repricing, 6 or 7 times in that 15-minute period if my competitor isn't moving. And can you remind me of that second question, Dustin?
Yeah. So if you do change your price, like if SellerSnap changes the price of the product for me, how quickly is that price live on Amazon?
So great question. The tough part from a full transparency from a service provider perspective is, because we are a third party dealing with Amazon's API, once we send that repricing feed, it is in the hands of Amazon. And so we can see it as fast as 15, 20, 30 seconds of sending that repricing feed. But we've also seen it be much higher in terms of a few minutes. Generally, I would say on average, it's anywhere between 20 seconds to a minute tops. But I would say that's on average. But again, certain times a day, I'm sure on Amazon side, there's peaks that might cause slower response times.
Now let's talk about just more of the features of, because there's a lot to repricing. There's a lot of different components that you're wanting to do. And I'm really curious to see just what your system can do. Because I know there's some basics, like do you want to compete against prime sellers, or do you want to compete against all sellers, whether they're FBA or FBM? I'm sure you're putting a range of price that you're willing to sell within. So what are all the factors that you are trying to compete on through the repricing?
So like you said, there's a whole slew of factors that we have to take into account when repricing. But again, we are looking at who our active competitors are. And so the way that SellerSnap looks at it is that we are looking at who has competed for the buy box and in the past 24 hours. And so that looks at, and then from there we can take into account the fulfillment type of the competitor. Are they FBA or fulfilled by Amazon, or FBM, fulfilled by merchant? What price are they at? And if they're FBM, for example, do they provide a shipping price? All these different factors we take into play.
How does this work? Like, what private label sellers, this is probably, they don't change their price enough. I was working with the seller and I was like, man, you got to raise your price because you're not making enough profit here. Like, you can't be selling $10, $15 items and try to run advertising effectively. You need to raise your price a little bit more. And his concern was like, well, I'm going to lose sales. I'm like, yeah, but you're going to make more profit on this. And like, how do you work with private label sellers? Because a lot of private label sellers don't even think about raising their price. But I think that's the biggest thing that we're missing out on. Like, if you just raise your price 50 cents, $1, 75 cents slowly, you can start to see more profit. Does SellerSnap work with private label sellers? And if so, what's the setup look like?
Sure. One of the big initiatives that we have for this year and next year is increasing our offering for private label sellers, because although we typically cater to the reseller market, the retail arbitrageurs and the wholesalers out there, we see that more and more sellers are moving towards that private label space. And so we have a couple of solutions today that help private label sellers. But I think, Chris, what you're talking about is more in terms of what I kind of consider the holy grail of private label repricing, which is that balance between profit margin and velocity.
Yeah.
Because what you want to do is you want to find that optimal point where you can sell at that highest possible price, but maintain that velocity and keep making sales as often as you can, depending on your specific category, of course, because certain categories, are going to sell much faster than others. And so the difficult part in that is, as sellers, understanding how many items do I actually want to sell in a given time period, let's say, and is it realistic? Because sellers are like, I want to sell 1 million units a month, but if it's not the right category, you don't have the right price point because of your production costs, your overhead, including PPC, then you're kind of out of luck. And so velocity repricing is something that we currently are working on. We're in beta stages, and we have quite a few customers that are using it and constantly receiving feedback about it. And so the way that works is that sellers will set how many items do you want to sell in a given time period. And so we look at a 7 and 30-day period. And what the repricer does is it adjusts the price in order to try to hit those goals at the highest possible price. So as I get closer to that 7-day time period, if I'm about to hit my goal, I know I can start to raise my price a little bit, or if I haven't hit my goal, I'll start to lower the price. Again, a lot of factors that come into play, and also it requires sellers to be a bit realistic with how many you can actually sell in a given time period. But it's something that's really cool. And there's a couple other points, but you both coming from more of that private label space, that brand space, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, one thing that I was just thinking about is when it raises it, there's a risk there of getting that actually losing the buy box, and it says available from these sellers, either because you lowered your price too much in a short period of time, or you raised it too much and it takes you out of the buy box, and that little text on the product page shows up that says available from these sellers, and you're no longer in the buy box. I've seen that happen before, especially with running PPC. Is somebody with a new product, for say they'll launch a product, it'll be at their full price, and then they'll just lower the price drastically, and they lose the buy box. Is that is that going to be something that with Seller Snap is going to be preventable? Because raising the price $1 or $2 or even higher can actually get you out of the buy box, and you actually will lose sales.
Yeah, I kind of understand where you're coming from, and I think it's important to make a distinction between losing the buy box, which is how we would refer to it in terms of wholesalers, of resellers. I no longer have the buy box because one of my competitors have the buy box. And what I believe you're referring to has to do with private label and brands where the buy box is suppressed, where there is no buy box because that price is taken away. And so understanding the difference between we're understanding the difference between the two is important, because when it comes to buy box suppression, we do have rules that you'd be able to set that says, all right, if the buy box is suppressed, let's go to the last known price. Let's start to lower the price, and so on. So there are ways to mediate that those kinds of risks, and it's something that we have to be really aware of, and not just the buy box suppression is something we have to be aware of, but those kind of those pesky stranded inventory scenarios that Amazon calls something price gouging, and now your item is stranded and you're not selling at all. You have no chance of selling because it's not an active offer anymore. So these are all things that we take into account in terms of how we reprice for private label and brands.
I think that's a very interesting thing because, like Chris mentioned, us as private label sellers, we manipulate our price every once in a while in response to something like, hey, we need to get sales going, so let's drop it. But we're never really trying to find that like ROI sweet spot, you know, where you can, and where you're adjusting these prices, even if you adjust your price 25 cents up. I mean, that can be, and if you sell hundreds of units a day, that can be a major impact on your profit just by doing those. So I think this is going to be an interesting space moving forward to see how repricing really can benefit private labelers. Now, going back to the wholesale model, because, you know, periodically I will do some arbitrage, or I'll clean out all my books in my house and list them and sell them on Amazon. And Amazon does have repricing built into their platform. And so, you know, you can do things, like I said, it's basic. You can say, hey, I want my range to be within here. Explain how a third-party solution like SellerSnap goes beyond what Amazon's offering, and why that's important for people. If your business is wholesale, then you know, velocity is that's what you're looking for. You got to make a lot of sales because your margins are usually smaller. So explain how repricing with a third-party solution like you is much different than what Amazon offers.
Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, Amazon has a repricing model or a repricer that really what they do is that they have the rules to lower the buy box when you are not in it. A very simple differentiation between SellerSnap and Amazon is that we aim to bring that price up. And so it kind of makes sense, because we spoke about at the beginning of this episode that Amazon is focused on, you know, on the customer and making sure that they get the best price. So they don't have as much skin in the game as the third-party sellers do, because they want those sellers to have, or they want the customers to have the best possible price. So it's in their best interest for sellers to keep working their way down, which is part of reason, you know, the buy box exists, to create that competition, to lower the price and get customers the sales at the best price for them.
All right, so let's talk about now the setup process. Let's say I am a seller, I'm a wholesale seller, and I'm using SellerSnap now. What am I inputting into SellerSnap to get that repricing started? Let's walk through that. How complex can that get, or how simplistic is it? Am I just putting the range I'm willing to sell products in, or am I putting ROI, or what am I inputting in there to get this repricing started?
Yeah, so from a very simple level, the only thing that you need to input is your min and max, and turn repricing on. That min and max price can be calculated in a few different ways. Some sellers have their own formulas that they use, and they might upload it, you know, with an Excel file or CSV file. And some sellers say, you know, I want, you know, X percent above my purchase cost and that is the minimum markup that I want to make, or the minimum ROI I want to make, and then here's the maximum as well. And so once you have that min and max set, all you have to do is turn repricing on and let the AI do its thing.
And so the AI, let's talk about that a little bit more. Sure. in terms of what it's doing, because you mentioned that Amazon is obviously, for the most part, the lowest price is going to win the buy box. There's a lot of other factors involved, for sure. But when we're using SellerSnap and we put our min and max on there, what is it's repricing based on? Is it always going to try to go below whoever's winning the buy box, as long as it's within that min and max? And then if the price changes, is it bumping it up? Explain just sort of what it's doing.
Okay. Absolutely. You know, there's so many different things that we can jump into, and I am the best at going down rabbit holes of scenarios, and we can keep on going back and forth. And I don't think we have enough time for that today. But what I can do is I can go through a couple of scenarios to kind of give you a taste of how that works. Yeah. And so, you know, putting SellerSnap aside, what we see a lot of times with rule-based repricers, so it's not the AI, but it's a rule-based, is sellers will go with the strategy of undercut my lowest competitor by a penny, right? because that's what gets me into the buy box. And so what happens is that if, Chris and I are on a listing together, and Chris has a price, I undercut him by a penny. He undercuts me, I undercut him. We end up doing this back and forth, entering this price war, and ultimately bottoming out that price.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of the day, we are both cutting into our margins. And again, depending on where that min and max is set, it could be detrimental to my business. So where seller snap comes into play is that we see that this is happening, and we understand that Chris is essentially attached to my price, right? He's attached to my price minus a penny. So what I will do as seller snap is I will capture the buy box and I'll raise to my max price or a portion of my max price, and I'll wait there for Chris to come with me. And so that decision is made already knowing that Chris is attached to my price and will raise price with me. Once he comes up with me, what I'll do is I'll then re-engage, undercutting him, letting him undercut me, and we kind of enter this micro price war. But we're doing it at that top end of my min-max range. And so the result in both scenarios is that we're getting about 50% of the buy box share, right? Because every time we exchange blows, we're capturing some buy box. But with seller snap, we're actually doing it at a higher price point. And so, which would give us a positive effect on our profit and our profit margin.
That's an interesting scenario, actually. Because that's the flip side of racing to the bottom. If you keep taking it to the top, then you can slowly race down again and then keep going to the top. I like that.
Yeah, and the point is that you don't always have to go all the way down to the bottom in order to restart that cycle. Seller snap will wait until it says we got too low or we've done this too much, and then it will go back up. And that varies from listing to listing, category to category. But the idea is that I never want to be at my min price. I always want to be elevated, and so that's really our goal. Another really quick scenario is a situation where, like, let's go with me. I'm going to go with me and Chris. Chris, I'm picking on you because you were saying that you're the guy that was that was bringing down the prices.
I am that guy.
Yeah.
so I'm holding it against you.
Yeah.
You should.
But so in this scenario, Chris is coming up against me, and I'm seller snap, and he's matching my price. And so what seller snap will notice is that if I lower my price, Chris matches me again. And so the question is can I, as long as Chris is matching me, how high can I go where he is still matching me? And so what we'll do is we'll keep raising that price, and Chris keeps coming with. And then let's say, we hit a $20 price point, and then I lose Chris, right? He doesn't come up with me. Now we found his max price. And so now we have sniffed out the highest possible point to be at, that while still maintaining that equilibrium with Chris. So hopefully we are rotating the buy box, still making sales. And again, we've gone and maximized that profit and profit margin.
I like that. That's sneaky little tactic there. What about inventory? Just like, what if I only have 10 units and you have 1,000 units? Does it ever come to a point where it's like, just let this guy go, he's only got 10 units, let him get out of the listing and move on? Or does the inventory have anything to do with this?
So kind of a mixed question, because there are theories out there. I talk to a lot of sellers. I look at a lot of listings. I look at a lot of stores on a daily basis. And, there are theories out there that says inventory does matter when Amazon is when awarding the buy box. In terms of the way that seller snap works, and I understand the second part of the question of where you're coming from. Can I look at my competitors' inventory and reprice based on that? Let them sell out so then I can have the buy box to myself. And because that data point of my competitors' inventory is not transparent to me via Amazon's API through the marketplace web services, it's not something that we do. I know that there are some other solutions out there that show inventory, But at this point, it's not a capability of SellerSnap, and so we are really looking only at the pricing.
What about? I don't know the answer to this, but I've always been curious about this because I have suspicions. But is Amazon awarding the buy box based on location? Like, for example, if everyone is selling, roughly the same price or whatever, and my products happen to be in Texas and the buyer is shopping in Texas, would Amazon award that one because they can save money on shipping? Do we know? And if so, is that taken into account?
So we don't know anything
Right.
about the buy box algorithm. The buy box algorithm is a black box by Amazon, and if we knew more about it,
you would imagine that'd be crazy.
we'd be in a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is that we do know that there are regional buy boxes that are awarded based on different metrics. Some of it I can go under some assumptions from personal experience, being location, and I'll tell you, I can tell you a little bit about what it was and this experience that I had. I tell a lot, and I think it's kind of funny. Is that I had a customer who was selling, like, I think it was decorations for like country parties or farm parties or things like that. And I don't remember exactly what the product was, but it was because they were like really big products. It was like an empty oil drum or like a bale of hay or something absurd like that.
Sounds like a fun party.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just 10,000 red Solo cups. And so what we found was that he had actually had one other competitor on this, which surprised me the most. And our customer was fulfilling through FBM, they were both fulfilling through FBA. And my customer happened to know that the only place that he sent this product in was to a place in California. And so when we looked at that same product on Amazon in Florida, the seller, the competitor, was actually winning the buy box at a significantly higher price. And so that was a bit of validation for us, because when we're talking about a pack of pens or whatever with Prime Air and all these things, that is negligible to Amazon, and they might be able to make those movements cross country in 2 days, no problem, for a fairly cheap price. But when we're talking about something big like a barrel or a bale of hay or something like that, we know that that's going to be quite costly for Amazon. And so we can see, and so we were able to see and basically validate through some assumptions, nothing, there could have been other factors in play, that they made a choice of who they awarded the buy box to based on what was most economical for them to ship. And again, it's a theory, it's an assumption, but I think I think there's a lot of other people out there that would agree with me on that based on that scenario that we saw.
I think so. I have always had that suspicion. It makes sense. Why would if Amazon has a way to save money, why wouldn't they do it?
Well, even on the private label side, like when I send in like 100 units, and when I send in like 1,000 units, I feel like I sell more because I got more inventory spread around in places where if I just did 100 units, it feels like a slower sales velocity. But for some reason, I don't even want to look at it, but whenever you fill in, like whenever I send in more inventory, it feels like I sell more, maybe because they're moving it to different warehouses and I'm showing up more. I have no idea, but it feels like it anyway.
It'd be interesting to know if Amazon changes the organic rank
based off inventory,
based off geography, and where people are. Yeah, you never know. They're
black box. You'll never know.
Black box.
That's what we'll never know. Ian, this is always fun to talk about. I think anything like this is a fascinating topic, and repricing is not something that we've touched on much on our show. So we really, really appreciate you coming on and letting everyone know all about it. If anybody who's listening right now is in the wholesale market or even the private label, like you talked about, and interested in your new products that you're coming out, how can they try out Seller Snap? How do they get in touch with you? And I think you've got a deal for us that we put in the show notes. So let us know all about that.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested from the wholesale side, from the arbitrage side, even, if you're trying to get on the ground level side of brands and private label, you can always reach out to us through our website at sellersnap.io. And you can see that it's there on the little screen right below us. And if for anyone listening to this, there's a discount for 30% off your first month, and that is after your free 15-day trial. And so really what I tell everyone that I speak to, all the customers and all the clients, is that when we're finding the right tools, and whether it's Sellozo or Seller Snap for our Amazon business, it's like finding the right pieces to the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And so most solutions out there provide a free 15-day trial or some kind of trial, and so it's important to take advantage of it and see if it's the right fit. And so that's kind of our commitment to our clients to set you up for success through that trial and beyond. And again, try to get that buy box and get it at the highest possible price.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah. And everybody, that link is in the description. So go ahead and click that and you can get started with your trial and start repricing. So Ian, yeah, thanks so much. This has been a really fascinating topic. We really appreciate it. I encourage everyone to click that link and check you guys out. And also for everyone listening, if you're struggling with your advertising or if you'd like to just get that manual work off your plate, that's what Sellozo's here for. So you can go to Sellozo.com. You can book a demo with either Chris or myself right on the home page. We'll walk you through how Sellozo can help you automate and optimize your advertising. And then we'll get you. We can also talk about anything you want. We love talking Amazon, as you can see. So on those demos, we can do whatever you need. Look at your listings and just strategize. So make sure you do that. Also, if you like content like this, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe also to the places where we go live. We take this live every day on Sellozo's Facebook page, Sellozo's LinkedIn, and on Sellozo's YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe there. You can turn on notifications so you know when we go live. Ian, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back at this again tomorrow. See you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.